Could you come and join us, Mike? Have a seat on the couch. We're going to talk for a few minutes, and I just really, like I told you earlier, I want to find out about how you got to be a godly man.
Well, for me, it really began when I found out we were pregnant with our first child. Not having a father. I guess you don't miss what you don't have. Well, not having a father, I missed having a father. I'd looked for a father figure in growing up my whole life, and I had different men that kind of became my father figure. Some of my coaches, my Sunday school teachers, some of the men, the blue-collar men that my stepfather were around. I described those men as still having the bark on them because there wasn't a smooth part to them. They were very rough, but they were very loving and very joyful, and they were playful with us as kids. And so I looked at different men to be a father figure. My grandfather, who was also one of those blue-collar men, loved me, and I knew that. And that's one of those things. When I became a father, I wanted to be the father that I would be proud of and my children would be proud of also.
Well, the minute I met you, Mike, there was something different about you. I mean, I knew that. And we sat in your studio that day, and you showed me some of your artwork. And the first thing you said to me was when your wife was pregnant with your first child. What was it you told me?
Well, I knew that God was talking to me. He was whispering in my ear. He was over my shoulder. He was in every aspect of my day. He said, Mike, this is very serious.
Because before then you weren't serving God.
I really wasn't. I mean, I knew about God. I went to Sunday school. My grandmother was probably my greatest example of what a godly woman can be. And I've always described her home as being heaven on earth. It was always a place where it was safe, and it was always a place filled with love and good food, too. So that's kind of the way I see heaven.
Love those grandmas.
Absolutely, absolutely. But while I was pregnant, I went through the Bible seriously, read through it 3 times, all the way through. I had the Bible in my hand every moment of the day. And I knew there was a certain part of the Bible in Malachi that said, I will send you Elijah the prophet, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and turn the hearts of the children to the fathers. And so when my first child was born, and it was a boy, it was obvious his name was going to be Elijah, because through Elijah, God had turned my heart to him, the Father, and turned my heart to my children at the same time.
I mean, how many people, though? I mean, you said you read the Bible 3 times?
3 times.
While your wife was pregnant?
Yes. It's easy when that's all you do. I did it every part of the day. And since then, I've made it a practice to read the Bible through at least once a year, all the way through, every year, too. I'm one of those people, I'm a visual learner. So I don't learn as well as I should by reading. Someone needs to show me. I need to see pictures.
I think I'm that way too.
Okay.
I have to read and see. I'm not as good at visualizing things as you are, obviously,
That's
from
good.
all the paintings.
I don't need any more competition.
But back when your wife was pregnant, I keep going back to that because it's so important for our viewers to understand what it means to really have that influence in the beginning of your life. So your kids were so fortunate that you already had that established in you, even if it didn't actually start till your wife was pregnant.
Exactly.
God was grooming you to prepare you to be that father. So they had an extra boost where a lot of people don't.
Well, they did, and they finally, they're old enough now to realize that. My daughter especially, she's a writer and wants to be a writer, and so she's very good.
So where'd that creative side come from?
I know. Both my kids are artists, poor things. But they know, and they're very aware of the kind of advantages they've been giving as a father who loves them, a father who's going to guide them, a father who's not going to let them make the big mistakes, who lets them make the small mistakes and learn from their consequences, but who will protect them from the big mistakes as much as possible.
Oh, wow.
And who's been open to talk about anything and everything. Our dinner table is completely open to every aspect of conversation, any question. And I tell them, question every authority at church, every authority at school, and even my authority. But when they question my authority, be ready with a good argument, because I've already studied everything there is to study, and I have the answer. And they may not like that. And, of course, they've been raised with very high expectations. My personal motto has always been, all I'm looking for is perfection.
Oh, wow.
So those standards are very high. Now, I don't mean perfection in the sense that it's a lack of anything that they can fail at. I mean perfection in the sense that it was in the Greek originally, where it's completeness. I want them to be a complete person.
Sure.
And complete in their life, complete in their goals, complete in their belief in themselves and expectations, that sort of thing too. So perfection in that sense is really what I'm looking for in them.
Well, now, we talked earlier about being successful, and you said that you had never even thought about not being successful. I'm trying to figure out, how does that happen? Because, you know, I grew up thinking, am I ever going to be successful, thinking that I would probably fail most of my life. And you know what? Because I thought that, most of my life I did. So how did you get a jump start on me?
That's a good question. I don't know where that came from, other than the fact that I knew I was loved, and I just had this fear of failure that showed up and manifested itself in me at a very young age. And so I strived for perfection in everything I did. My school, my grades, my body, everything I've done, I've always tried to be as perfect as possible. I never saw myself failing. I remember when I was 7 and 8 years old, I'm going to be a professional football player. I'm going to be then I'm going to be a professional artist. I'm going to be successful. I thought I'd have Lear jets and all that kind of stuff. But that's 6 years old, you know. Reality was, to be a professional football player, I needed to pick bigger parents. That was my only problem.
Oh, wow, okay.
But I started my second career as an artist very early. I started selling my stuff in the 7th grade. Small successes build on larger successes, which build on larger successes. You know, in the Bible we talk about faith is the thing hoped for, belief in things hoped for but yet unseen. Well, mine were seen. I could see them and fully visualize in my mind from a very early age, and it was an easier way for me to achieve it. Once it's already happened, now you just have to go through the steps to get there.
That's right. That's right. What was your first picture that you drew that got recognition?
Well, the first published drawing was for Hot Rod Cartoon Magazine. I was 11 years old, and I had my mom sign it so it looked like an adult did it.
Oh, wow.
And I received a check in the mail the next month for $50, and it was published in that magazine. So my published career started very early.
Okay. Now, of course, I've seen a lot of your pictures, as a matter of fact. Do you know, you probably don't know this, but or remember this, you gave me a bunch of little, do you remember that?
I do.
I have saved those.
Oh, well, thanks.
One of these days, I'm going to frame them and put them all over my house.
Well, there'll be a lot of them to frame.
I mean, because you make them come alive. You know, every little character, it's like, wow.
Well, I love to read, and there's a quote that I kind of penned years ago. Words are the wings of our imagination, but pictures are the final destination. Everyone I know who reads sees pictures in their minds. Luckily, I was just born with a camera stuck in my head, so I could kind of take a picture, and I can bring that picture to life. And for me, it's more about the emotional impact. It's always about the story. It doesn't matter how pretty the painting is. It doesn't matter how well painted it is. If the story is incomplete, it's a failure. And it's always about the story. So that more than anything, that empathy between the viewer and the character, or the main character and some of the other characters, but I'm trying to communicate in all the paintings that even portraits. I call my portraits really stories of this person's life in one picture. You know, how someone looks, you can tell from their eyes, you can tell from their hands, their gestures, their body posture, that sort of thing. And I enjoy meeting famous men and women across the United States and hearing their stories and trying to reinterpret that through paintings.
Well, now we've got some of your books here. Now, I don't think one of these is your first book, correct?
No, my first book was Train Song. I think we had it earlier, but
I have a copy of this one that you signed for me back in 2003. Talk about this for a minute, because that's one of the Oklahoma boys there.
This is, and it has a great story behind it. I had been looking for an author to write a book about Will Rogers. Will Rogers has been a hero of mine for as long as I can remember. And I talked to some of my friends who were very prolific writers, and they were all busy doing other things. And just by sheer coincidence, I was working in my studio and got a phone call from Governor of Oklahoma. Hello, Mike Wimmer, this is Frank Keating. And I couldn't help it, I stood up. I mean, it's like the governor's on the line. And so he was inviting me to have lunch with him to talk about a project, and I didn't know what it was. And so, okay, that was great. Well, 30 minutes later, I also get a phone call from the First Lady, who wants to have me at the governor's mansion before I meet with the governor. I knew something was up. I didn't know what it was. But after speaking with the governor and his interest in doing children's books and writing about children's books, and he was asking me questions about it, one of those aha moments where I contacted my publisher and I said, if we could get the governor of Oklahoma to write this book about Will Rogers and have me from Oklahoma illustrate it, I think we might have something.
Wow.
And that's kind of where it started. And that began a long friendship. Governor Keating and I still speak with each other probably once a week. You know, we're talking about many different projects, we're traveling back and forth. This was our first book together. Our second book was Theodore, and that's first of 4 books that'll be about the presidents on Mount Rushmore. And then our latest book is The Trial of Standing Bear. And it's this book that really started the conversation, because he had written this book years ago and was trying to get it published, but we couldn't find a publisher who was interested. And I think, like with anything, they want success. Once success is bred from Will Rogers, Theodore, and some of the other projects, then they were willing to look at this book.
Well, speaking of success again, how does God play a part in the success of a person? I mean, where is He in all of this?
Well, He's in everything I do, and I don't try to sound sacrilegious in any way, but we were made and created in God and the Father's image. And I don't mean that I have the same hands God has, I have the same color eyes God has, or anything at all like that. What I mean is God is a creator, and God has instilled within me the ability to create, and He's instilled in all of us the ability to create at one point or another. And that joy of taking something, an idea that literally was not there 5 minutes ago, and forming it with your own mind and your will, the materials around you, and turning that into something that everybody else can see, is so joyful. That must be exactly what God felt like when He created the universe. That resides within all of us.
Right.
Some of us more than others, but for me, it's one of the things I'm extremely thankful of, and I carry that thankfulness in everything I do, because it is a blessing. It is something I recognize as a blessing. And
you can see it all over you.
Well, I try. Anyway. Thank you.
I want to touch on this book, because this is your newest.
This is my newest book. It comes out to release. The official release date is April 2nd. That's next week, I guess, from the time we're recording here. And it's really a 40th anniversary celebration of that first man-moon landing in July 20th, 1969. It's the second, really, part of a book that the author, Bob Burley, and I did our first book about Charles Lindbergh, The Crossing the Atlantic. And what's amazing, I mean, for 10,000 years of human history, we could only get around by walking or horseback or, a cart or something along those lines. And then in 1907, I believe, the Wright brothers created the first powered flight machine. 20 years later, Lindbergh was flying across the Atlantic. And then 40 years later, we're stepping on the moon. That's an incredible feat that man's been able to, and continues to grow and grow and go faster and faster, that technology. But there is nothing that man cannot do if he will only envision it, set a goal, and make himself do it. There's nothing impossible to do. And this is just one of the celebrations of that proof.
Great. Well, we have to break for a minute for a commercial break, but I want you to come back in just a second, and we're going to talk about some of those paintings that you're so famous for doing. So there's so many of them that I really, really like. And one of these days, I'm going to have some of the originals hanging in my home.
I hope so.
If we can come back for just a minute, we're going to break for a sponsor break. If you guys like our show, please patronize our sponsors. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us again. And Mike, there's so many pictures that you've done, and I know that we haven't touched on all of them. So give me, I think, that one about your daughter.
Oh, well, that one that you're referring to is called The Tales of Peter Rabbit. And that was one of those paintings I did with my daughter for her second birthday. They're all inspired by things that really happened in their life. I had painted her bedroom and decorated it with bunny rabbits. We painted bunnies on the wall. She had stuffed bunnies on her bed. She had bunnies on her bookshelves. There were bunnies everywhere. So in that painting, she's having a tea party with some of her favorite bunny rabbits, and she's reading them their favorite book.
And it looked real.
Well, it does look real. She was real. I mean, the hard part was getting a 2-year-old to sit still. So I set everything up and then took photographs that way and then set her there with the book, and she stayed there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and that's all that I got. Luckily, the bunny rabbits will sit as long as you want them to, so not a problem.
Now, with your children, what do they think as they look back over the years? At the time when she was doing that, she didn't realize what she was doing. But as she looks at the pictures now, every year documents her life or documents Eli's. What are they thinking?
Well, you think at first that this is just a pain. Dad, do we have to do that again? But I missed one of Eli's birthday paintings because I just had a deadline. Too many things going on. And a couple of weeks had gone by, and he's, well, Dad, aren't you going to paint my picture this year? I mean, it's become something they expect, and they know, and they're throughout the house. So you walk through my house, it's kind of like a documentary of my children's life and that sort of thing, too. But they do. They're very special, and they've really grown to those, and they want their friends in them as much as possible, too. Lauren turns 18 this year, And she, like so many of the other girls, is taken with this new Twilight book and that sort of thing. And she's texting with her best friends all the time. So this painting will be her and her best friend Gabby in their funky-looking pajamas with the Twilight book in front of them, popcorn, snacks, and then texting one another or whatever on the phone. So that's going to be a real-life kind of painting for them.
Wow. So what's coming, I mean, what happens after they grow up and they're out of the house? Does this keep going on, or?
Well, it probably will. It'll probably be transferred to grandchildren.
To grandchildren.
Yes, exactly.
You bet, yeah. Just like the grandparent that helped you.
Exactly, just like my grandma. I think they'll see me as that little boy who's just wrinkled skin, kind of playing with all the time.
Wow. That you've had such a great life, you know, and I know with my own relationship with the Lord, how that He's taught me things about Him. And I know that that's how you got to be where you're at in your success, is because God has created a plan for you, just for you, and just orchestrated every area of your life. But you had to be willing.
You do, and it's from the Scripture, you know, that raise up a child in the way that he or that child should go, what's right for that child. And when they were old, they will not depart from it. And I haven't departed from it.
Wow. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you,
with us.
Victoria.
And I want you to come back sometime and spread the word about making it happen.
I will,
Okay?
very well.
I'm glad you came to join us again. We've got Mike Wimmer here with us, a very well-known artist right here in Oklahoma. Edmond, right?
I live in Norman.
In Norman, okay.
Oklahoma.
And I've got to show you some of his artwork. It is fantastic. And one of these pictures, do you have a title for this?
It's just the title, it's the cover for the new book I'm working on called A Diary of Childhood, A Father's Love.
There are so many young people out there today that don't really have a good father image to look upon. That's why it intrigued me so much to have Mike on the show today. But this picture right here is Mike standing, how many years ago now?
This is 22 years ago.
22 years ago with his son. I mean, can you imagine being a son that's got this kind of a picture to look back on his youth? And see the little, is that like a braid that...
That was a long braid. It got longer than you even see it there.
He actually had that braid there.
I had that color hair too.
But beautiful, beautiful picture. You've got so many good things. And I told you a couple of the pictures that I really, really like is the new Mr. Clean. Now, how'd you get to do the...
I started doing the Mr. Clean for Procter & Gamble back in 1993 and did all their advertisements for about 5 years and recreated a new, kinder and gentler Mr. Clean when they had reformulated the product.
Wow. And then the other one that I like so
another
well?
one that everyone, and of course my kids think I'm famous for, is also I did the soundtrack album cover and the promotional posters for The Lion King, for the first movie. Later I got to work on the second Lion King movie. Then I got to work on Hunchback of Notre Dame, other movies along those lines too. So.
This is a God thing.
It is a God thing.
Anybody could have done those.
Yeah, why me in Oklahoma?
Why you?
I understand.
That's right, that's right. And then there's that other one that I like about your little girl sitting.
Oh yeah, well every year for my kids' birthdays, this started as a way originally to pay the doctor back who had delivered the baby. I painted the first picture of Eli for that. But every year for my kids' birthdays, I've been painting their portraits. And these portraits are not just pictures of what they look like, but they're also pictures of who they are as they're growing up, their interests and how they're changing. So it's really like a documentary of my kids' childhood. And that's where the idea for this book, A Diary of Childhood, A Father's Love, came from. And every painting is just them growing up. And when they turned 13, we had a blessing ceremony.
Oh, yes.
And it was a blessing ceremony to really kind of recommit them to Christ, to understand their place and their name, their really biblical name given to them at their birth and that sort of thing too. I have an example here. This is a study, a painting I did of my daughter Lauren just before her 13th birthday. The full painting shows her as one of the wise virgins holding her lamp before her with the cruises of oil filled to the top. She's one of the wise virgins. But she's wearing that crown of victory because her name Lauren means the victorious one, the one who wears the crown.
Wow.
And it's really a representative of the crown that we will all receive one day. You know, all those who are believers were given a mark on their foreheads. And the mark on her forehead is the Tav, right here we see as part of the crown.
Right.
We're also told that when we're given that white stone, there will be a name on that stone that only the Father knows. And so for Lauren's crown, I had this crown made. It's solid gold, so it will never tarnish, representing the fact that our gift will never tarnish, our reward will never tarnish. Her Tav is engraved on the backside a name that only I know.
Oh, wow.
For no one but her. She's asked me, and I said, it's only for me to know. It's not for you to know. It's the same name that we've been given that only the Father knows. We want to know it. We try to find out, but only the Father knows what that name is. And this is kind of a representation for her. for my son Eli, I had a sword made for him. And it had the 10 Commandments engraved on one side and had the Hebrews 4:12 on the other side. That the Word of God is